Hey everybody, welcome to Crackpot, the podcast reaching every week. We dive into a different conspiracy theory and we discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts, I'm Tim.
And I'm Zach.
Hello Zach, welcome back.
Yeah, dude. We're here, we're live, we're coming at you this week, once again, each and every week.
We're going to get ahead. We're going to get ahead of the curve one of these days.
We've been talking a lot about this recently, like what can we actually do to get ahead of our recording schedule? We used to be so diligent.
I know. What happened?
I don't know, actually.
Life?
Yeah, there's just too much going on, I guess.
Jobs, kids,
Yeah.
sports.
A little bit of everything, I suppose.
A little bit of everything. Anyway, guys, we are coming at you with, I think, the very first UFO episode of the new season. So I'm excited to lay this out. And rather than talk about a new one, I thought it would be interesting to go back and look at a couple older UFO events. So I picked these because there's three we're talking about today, and they all take place in 1948.
Oh, wow.
So this is like, the first one is like 6 months after Roswell. So you have to think of this in like the public's consciousness at the time. So Roswell happened, maybe people heard about it, maybe they didn't. And it's just kind of like, okay, space aliens, maybe, I don't know. And then there's this, short 6 months, and these three big events happen, and they got press nationwide. In some cases worldwide, and it really got people thinking about the possibility of UFOs and aliens and cover-ups and everything else, and they're just plain interesting.
You know, it's interesting that you bring this up too. Like, if you think about kind of the time and the place, right? Like, we're going back to the late 1940s, and was the term UFO even coined at that point in time?
Maybe. Flying saucer?
Yeah,
I think?
yeah. That would have been about it. So certainly at that point in time, even hearing about this stuff, you'd probably think like, oh, surely somebody's imagination is running wild.
Right. What's wild about this is there are no saucers either.
Oh, that's different.
Yeah, okay. Should we just go into it?
No.
Let's go to next week. Okay, no. First one we're talking about here took place on October 1st, 1948, just over Fargo, North Dakota, and this is called the Gorman Dogfight.
I feel like I might have heard of this.
Chances are you've probably come across all of these in one form or another.
Sure.
But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if you have heard of this. So basically, it's called the Gorman Dogfight because the pilot that we're talking about here is George F. Gorman. He was a veteran fighter pilot of World War II at the ripe old age of 25 years old.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Think about World War II veterans in their 20s, huh? That's what we're talking about here. But okay, so as it goes, he was a member of the North Dakota National Guard. And him and some of his flying buddies were up doing some routine maneuvers and practice and that sort of thing in their P-51 Mustangs up and around the air over the Fargo area. And the squadron, I guess it's called, the squadron got back to the airport, and this is the Hector Airport just outside of Fargo, around 8:30 p.m., and they all landed except for Mr. George Gorman. He looked around, he's like, this is a beautiful, clear night, like no clouds, full moon, not a full moon, but a bright moon. I need to get some extra nighttime flying in. Perfect conditions, I'm just going to stay up and keep doing it. They're like, all right, George, go knock yourself out. So he continues flying around, and he did notice a small Piper Cub aircraft. This is like even smaller than a Cessna. We're talking like just a single prop plane. Sure. He sees it, flying around about 500 feet below him. And he's like, okay, good to know. And he looks out to the west, and this is when he sees a blinking light in the sky. And he's like, that shouldn't be there. I wonder what that is. So he radios the tower, and he's like, hey, do you have anyone in this area off to my west? And they're like, no, it's just you and the Piper Cub. That's all that's up in the air right now. And he's like, well, that seems weird because I see it. So the radio tower gets a hold of the Piper Cub aircraft, and they're like, do you also see this? And they're like, yes, we do. What is that? And they're like, I don't know. So Gorman gets wind of this, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to go find out.
So, okay. Very interesting.
Right.
Very logical, yep.
So he pushes the throttle down. He gets up to full speed, which is about 400 miles per hour, and he can't catch up. This thing is moving too fast for him. So it's going kind of in a different direction. So he's like, okay, well, I can't chase it directly. I'm going to try to like cut it off at the pass, kind of like take an angle to maybe catch up with it. And he tries that, but all of a sudden the thing just makes a U-turn essentially and flies about 500 feet directly over his plane.
Oh boy.
And what he saw, what he described to the tower, was a simple ball of light 6 to 8 inches in diameter. And he said it is a clear white light. There's no fuzz, there's no haze around it. It's not actually like illuminating anything around it. It's just a ball of light.
Got it. Okay.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, I think we've seen and or heard of quite a lot of this, especially recently. Not to mention in the past.
Right. So, I mean, 1948, like this flying orbs, or even plasma balls, or whatever this could possibly be, it's not in the common vocabulary. So he's like, what am I seeing up here? So he chases after it. And again, the thing comes back at him. And what it does is it comes straight at him and then goes into a sudden like vertical climb, like almost straight up. So he pulls back and he starts to chase this thing. They're both like going almost straight up. His plane can't catch up and it ends up stalling out. So he has to, kill the throttle, get it back going. And he does, but through all this maneuvering and flying around in the area, the control tower, they are able to get a clear view of this as well. One of the people up in the tower, they take out the binoculars, they look at it, and sure enough, he says it looks like a white ball of light. Huh. Like, I don't know how better to explain it. Okay. Was basically the direct quote. So anyway, it shoots off in a direction going southwest of Fargo. He follows this thing for like 25 miles. He was flying at about 14,000 feet. The light was at, he says, about 11,000 feet. Couldn't keep up. And all of a sudden, the thing just once again shot straight up into the clouds and never came back down again. And so Gorman, he just returns to the airport and he says, look, I mean, 6 to 8 inches, white ball of light, no sound, no exhaust, no odor, nothing. That's just what it was.
And he also couldn't keep up with it, too.
Exactly.
Huh.
So within hours of him landing, the U.S. Air Force shows up. And they have a few questions for him. This is, and we don't need to go into the whole history of this, but this is actually Project Sign, which is before Project Grudge, which is before Project Blue Book. So this is like the very, very early stages of the Air Force or government trying to collect data and figure out what is actually flying around in the sky. But they talk to him. Okay, so they interview Gorman. And they interview the Piper Cub pilot and the Piper Cub pilot's passenger. They both saw it. They interview 2 people in the control tower because they saw it. And they interviewed 2 people that were on the ground at the airport that also saw it.
Oh, wow. So it's been corroborated multiple times. Different people, different perspectives, different vantage points, different levels of training, experience, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, you can't get like a close of like capturing it in a box and taking it to a lab. Like you can't get a better view of this thing.
Right.
So I got a couple of quotes that he said during these interviews. Mr. Gorman said, I am convinced there was definite thought behind its maneuvers, which I find very fascinating. Cuts against the plasma, I guess, perhaps.
Well, it also cuts against any sort of, like natural phenomena, right? Mm-hmm. Which is basically, whether it was space plasma, which at the time I assumed they didn't know.
Probably not.
Clearly not a meteor, if it's like making different turns, different sorts of
right.
directions, so on and so forth.
Right. Okay, another quote he said, I am further convinced that the object was governed by the laws of inertia because its acceleration was rapid but not immediate. And although it was able to turn fairly tight at considerable speed, it still followed a natural curve.
Okay.
which I find so fascinating because when you hear more modern day accounts of UFOs, they say, hey, it stopped and it started in an instant.
Yep. Turns on a dime.
Turns basically. On like right angle turns. And he's saying, no, that wasn't it. That wasn't it.
Okay.
Which makes me wonder, I mean, given his perspective, which was almost like parallel to this thing, if someone was up in the air viewing one of these UFOs in modern times, would they have the same perspective or not? I don't know, obviously.
Well, sorry to cut you off, but it also makes you wonder, like, has the technology for aliens advanced in the last, like, 100 years or whatever?
Right. That was, like, Gen 1 of the drones that they send down. Now we're in, like, Gen 20 or something like that.
Exactly.
No, I'm with you, man. He said, I've never seen anything like it. If anyone else had reported such a thing, I would have thought they were crazy.
I believe that too, by the way.
So, yeah, what does the government think about Mr. Gorman? I mean, is he a credible witness? Well, they said he did not make the impression of being a dreamer. He reads little and only serious literature. He spends 90% of his time hunting and fishing, drinks less than moderately, smokes normally, and does not do drugs. He appears to be a sincere and serious individual who was considerably puzzled by his experience and made no attempt to blow up his story.
Huh.
In other words, completely credible.
It's funny because I assumed that they would try to discredit him at some level. Like even initially just say, oh, actually, you know what? He's on some medication. Perhaps
Right?
he was, hallucinating, something like that.
Well, the quote-unquote official story of what this was, they say it was a weather balloon.
Again.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the only thing that it could possibly be at that point in time.
It's the consensus. It was a weather balloon. And if not a weather balloon, then like a spy balloon, much like what they say crashed in Roswell.
Yes.
So a balloon that went up and was monitoring either sounds or radiation levels in the upper atmosphere to see if and when the Soviets were detonating nuclear weapons.
Got it.
So they say, yeah, I mean, you didn't know about it. You didn't know what it looked like because you weren't privy to that information. And neither was a control tower. So, mistake on your end. No big deal. Anyone could have made it. But yeah, it was a weather balloon.
Interesting.
So he never really spoke about it again, but after he died, his friends said that he was never convinced that he was dueling with a lighted balloon for 27 minutes.
27 minutes?
27
Oh, dude, you buried
minutes.
the lead. Okay, I was thinking...
Oh, like 30 seconds
5.
back and forth?
Yeah,
No, yeah.
perhaps.
He was just flying around trying to get a view of this thing. And I mean, for periods of those time, it was out of sight. He didn't know where it was, so he's looking. But nevertheless, yeah, he was up there for a good half an hour chasing a ball of light.
Dang.
All right. Well, that's story number one.
That was Gorman, right? The Gorman dogfight?
The Gorman dogfight.
Oh, actually, one follow-up question. Did he fire upon it at all?
No, he
Okay.
did not.
Right.
I don't even know if they had probably didn't have live rounds or
Fair
anything
point.
like that.
Yeah.
Also, no, he did not.
Okay.
Which could have led to some intergalactic incidences, I suppose. But anyway, let's go to number 2 on our list of 1948 UFO trilogies. This one happened before the Gorman case. This was actually in January 7th, 1948. So 6 months, almost to the date after Roswell. So this is called the Mantell UFO incident, and it took place over Kentucky. And again, we are talking about Captain Thomas F. Mantell, a member of the Kentucky Air National Guard. Now, this gentleman was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross Medal, the Air Medal, an Air Medal with 3 gold leaf clusters. He flew during D-Day. So, I mean, the guy, like...
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Credible.
Yeah.
And
okay.
a hero, among other things. So
We are not worthy.
yeah, right. So he had 2,867 flight hours, most of which were combat at this point. So the guy knew what he was doing. He knew what things looked like, et cetera, et cetera.
And that was like old school flying, right? So it's like, yeah, they had to rely upon like their senses.
Yep.
They knew even, important things that I suppose nowadays sensors and different, devices will tell them.
Exactly.
The man studied the air. Okay.
Exactly. So he was up flying around with his squad, and he got a call from the tower that said, hey, we have something unidentified. We need you to go see what it is. So what happened was over Kentucky, several hundred people reported seeing something in the sky.
Oh, okay.
So they called the sheriff, police department, sheriff, and everything like that. Sheriff's department, they got the calls, and they looked up and they were like, yeah, there's definitely something in the sky over us. So they called the Air National Guard, and then, of course, they told this group to go out and see what was going on. Something to keep in mind, maybe this was why tensions were higher or something, is right above Fort Knox.
Weird.
Right. So maybe someone was after the gold or something?
I was going to say, isn't that like ultra secure?
Ultra secure.
Isn't that the Fort Knox of Fort Knoxes?
It's the Fort Knox of Fort Knox. You're exactly right. I couldn't have said it better myself. So anyway, this is all happening at about 1 to 1:15 p.m. in the afternoon. So he and 3 of his squad mates are flying F-51 Mustangs. And they go out and they chase this thing. And he locks eyes on it. He sees it. He's chasing it. But it is so high up, he's not able to reach it. He keeps going and going higher and higher. And he's not equipped with the necessary like oxygen in his plane because no one really anticipated that would be an issue, I guess, when they took off.
Right.
But every plane except his turned around. They're like, at like 17,000, at 20,000, at 21, they're all turning around. They're like, this is too high. I can't take it. You're on your own, buddy. But he continues on. And reportedly, one of the last things that he said was, it appears to be a metallic object or possible reflections of the sun from a metallic object. And it's of tremendous size. I'm still climbing. The object is above and ahead of me, moving at my speed or faster. I'm trying to get close for a better look. So like I said, 3 planes turned back. He kept going, but he basically got to about 25,000 feet. He blacked out. The plane went into a dead spin.
Whoa.
And he crashed and died.
What?
Yeah.
No way, dude.
Yep.
I did not expect that ending.
Yeah, landed in a farmer's field.
Oh, my gosh. He went up 25,000 feet?
And blacked out because he didn't have any oxygen.
Oh, my gosh.
So,
But this begs the question, though, too, was he totally in control the whole time? So for instance, like, did he actually try to climb up that high? Or was he just being like, I don't know, sucked up?
Like the plane was taken under control by some entity or something. The tractor beams were sucking him in. Well, I mean, he did radio back and say, I'm going to try to reach it. I'm trying to get higher. So I would assume maybe, but hey, we don't actually know. So the jury's out on that one. But this was, of course, big news. I mean, you have hundreds of people on the ground seeing something in the air. You have, National Guard scrambled.
Yep.
A plane crashes. Of course, this is going to make news. Mm-hmm. And the immediate speculation said that a alien spacecraft shot him down. That was one. So another point of speculation was that his body was found riddled with bullet holes. Ooh. Some people said his body was actually missing from the plane when it landed.
Well, to be totally
crashed. Yeah.
Well, to be totally frank, I was not even sure the body would be around after that type of a crash. I don't know how to say it any differently.
Yeah. There was another group of people that said his plane was hit by a mysterious ray gun kind of thing.
Sure.
His plane disintegrated in the air. The wreckage was radioactive. His plane was found full of small, mysterious holes. So there's all this wild speculation going on. And to be perfectly clear, like, we, to this day, don't really know because, it's buried under, 14 layers of Army security and everything else like that. But we can assume that his body was there and the craft was there and everything else and probably wasn't shot down by alien spacecraft, I guess.
Well, it still makes me wonder if he lost control of it as a result of the UAP, let's say. And I guess we'll never know.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder, like, he's such an experienced pilot. He probably knew at some point he shouldn't keep going out.
That's what I'm thinking as well.
Yeah.
It's confusing. It's confusing.
Okay.
So J. Allen Hynek, our good friend, he used to write for Project Blue Book, and then, of course, later on recanted a lot of what he said and said, hey, there is something to this UFO phenomenon. But at the time, J. Allen Hynek said he was chasing Venus.
Well, I mean, that's... I was going to joke earlier about the first account and say, clearly it's Venus.
Clearly it's Jupiter. I mean,
yeah.
So he said that, and later he retracted it when he kind of saw the light, if you will. But this was seen by a couple of other credible people besides just people on the ground calling into the cops. An astronomer at Vanderbilt saw it through his binoculars. Would you like to hear how he described it?
Yeah, actually, I would.
He said it was a pear-shaped balloon with cables and a basket attached.
So basically like a hot air balloon?
Yeah.
Huh.
There were 2 air control tower people who saw it. One described it as something resembling an ice cream-filled cone or parachute.
Oh.
And the other one described it as white and round on top with a conical shape underneath.
Now, I'm kind of like scrolling through my Rolodex of UFO types or UAP types, and I feel like I've heard of this kind of, like, almost like this ice cream cone UAP.
Perhaps a UAP exists like that. I'm going to come out and say I'm 99% sure this was, in fact, a balloon.
You're kidding me.
No, not at all. It like the credible people, the tower, the astronomer, they're describing this as a white balloon shaped object, and furthermore, it's at like 25,000 feet. It was only going in one direction.
Yeah,
sure. People on the ground, they don't know what it is. I mean, hey, if we saw one out the window right now, we probably wouldn't know what it was if it was off in the distance. So you can't blame the guy necessarily.
Sure,
but at the time, they were, we talked about the balloons that were over Roswell, they were called skyhook balloons, and it was super classified. It was super top secret. Most people in the military, certainly the National Guard, did not know about this, but they use these things to measure the radiation in the upper atmosphere, like I mentioned, super top secret. So they would not have known about it. I am fairly convinced that this guy was chasing a balloon.
Wow. Well, I mean, I guess I can't really, make any point against that. But
what do we know? We only know what we have in front of us. But
right.
Things seem to point more in that direction than others. But nevertheless, coming off the heels like 6 months after Roswell, there's this another, weird thing that's happening in the skies, gets all sorts of press attention. And once again, the government's like, nope, it's a balloon. It's a balloon. Don't worry about it. So you can see why people are A, interested, and B, maybe questioning the official story.
Yeah, I guess on the other hand, though, I will say this much, which is also the fact that, like, because he was such an experienced pilot, although this may have been a advanced weather balloon, if you will, like, I kind of think he wouldn't have pursued it if it was just clearly some type of terrestrial craft.
Yep.
I think.
I'm kind of right there with you. It's interesting. I mean, because the guy had so many flight hours and he's seen probably everything under the sun that's up in the sky. And you would think that a pilot would be able to recognize an inflated balloon, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm with you right there. I mean, that's why I'm not like 100%. But, and he said it appears to be a metallic object or possible reflections of the sun from a metallic object, and it's of tremendous size. So the other thing about these balloons, they were launched from the ground just partially inflated, and then they would inflate more as they rose, and they could get like up to 400 feet wide.
Wow.
So these things were truly enormous when they got into the upper atmosphere.
Okay.
So maybe it was just taken aback by the just sheer enormity of the size of the
It's very possible. All right. So you come down as it being terrestrial.
I do. This one I definitely do. Yeah.
Okay. I'd say I need some more information first. I'm leaning towards it not being, though.
Yeah.
But,
I mean,
that's me. Whatever.
There we go. All right. Well, let's jump into our last one here. So this is called the Charles Whitty's UFO encounter. And this took place in July of 1948 at 2:45 a.m. What I like about this one, again, lots of multiple witnesses and all very credible. But again, it just makes no sense. So instead of an Air National Guard, we have a commercial flight this time. So this is a flight that is flying, I think it's like from Montgomery, Alabama to Houston, Texas. It is just a really short flight, and it was only at about 5,000 feet. But again, it's dead of the night, 2:45 a.m., and the two commercial pilots, Mr. Childs and Mr. Whitties, they saw a glowing object pass their plane before it pulled up into the clouds and out of sight. So
that's it.
I mean, that's the summary. Yes, I'll give you some details here.
Alien.
clearly an alien, right? The main pilot, Childs, he said he saw a dull red glow above and ahead of the aircraft. So think of this, it's dark out, obviously. They're at 5,000 feet, probably not talking much, and looking straight out ahead, out the windshield or the cockpit, and they start to see this little dull red glow coming at them. And of course, these guys are like, oh, yeah, it's a jet. It's an Army jet. It's a new fangled Army jet. No big deal.
Yeah, you see the, basically, whatever's making this thing go, you see the exhaust, if you will.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Precisely. And he says seconds later, it flew past the plane on the right side of the plane and then pulled up, quote, with a tremendous burst of flame out of the rear and zoomed up into the clouds. And they both got a good look at this thing because it was like basically at their same level. And they saw it both for 10 to 15 seconds. So something to,
not a ton of time, but also not like 1 second.
No, clearly, yes.
Okay.
10 to 15 seconds is longer than you think it is if you sit there and hold your breath or something. So anyway, both pilots said it looked like a wingless aircraft with 2 rows of windows inside that glowed a very bright light. What?
Okay, we've heard of these types of accounts before. Doesn't sound like an air balloon.
They said it was cigar-shaped, about 100 feet long, 30 feet in diameter, with flames coming out of the tail.
Oh, boy. So the cigar shape shows up.
Yeah, the cigar shape, that's common.
That is
common in its own way.
It is.
But it sounds like a Tic Tac. It sounds, they called them cigars back then before Tic Tacs were invented, I assume. I don't know when Tic Tacs were invented.
Or cigars.
Or cigars. Before cigars were invented, right. Anyway, yeah. 2 rows of windows?
Yeah, that rules.
Glowing from the inside.
Yeah, dude.
It's like, okay, I'm with it up to that point. And then they say fire and exhaust basically shooting out the back. It's like, no, that can't be a UFO. I've never heard of a UFO with exhaust.
Well, I was going to say that's one of the hallmarks of it being not a UFO, which is usually you can't see any sort of combustion. Or any sort of, like chemtrails or whatever, right?
Chemtrail. Thanks for referring to that as a chemtrail, yeah. Okay, well, that's kind of weird.
It gets me wondering, though, did anybody on the airplane see it?
Oh, yeah. So 30 passengers on the plane, right?
Oh.
2:45 in the morning. Only one person was awake.
Sure.
But he was sitting on the right side of the plane, and he saw it go past. He was, the passenger was actually an Air Force veteran. And he saw it and he said, I only saw it for like a couple seconds and all I saw was just a bright streak of light that shot past the plane. So he wasn't trying to make any stories. He wasn't trying to say, yeah, I saw through the window and there's a little green man was waving at me. And, nothing like that. He's like, I saw what I saw.
Yep.
It's a flash of light, nothing else. I mean, I don't really know what else.
Okay.
But nevertheless, corroborated by 3 people.
Yes, indeed.
But one other person saw an Air Force crew chief in Macomb, Georgia at the Robbins Air Force Base. Also saw, quote, an extremely bright light pass overhead at high speed. So, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
But what could it be?
What could it be? Not much to go off of here.
Maybe it's a meteor?
A streak in the sky, yeah, for sure. Traveling fast.
And it's got the flames coming off the back, right?
It makes sense, actually, that it's potentially a meteor.
All right. Well, Childs, he was quoted as saying, It was clear there were no wings present, that it was powered by some jet or other type of power, shooting flame from the rear some 50 feet behind it. There were 2 rows of windows, which indicated an upper and a lower deck, and from inside these windows, a very bright light was glowing. Underneath the ship, there was a blue glow of light.
Oh, wow. So you don't hear about that very often. Blue glow of light. Okay.
Or an upper deck and a lower deck of windows. Like, what? The co-pilot, Whitties, he said the object was cigar-shaped and seemed to be about 100 feet in length. The fuselage appeared to be about 3 times the circumference of a B-29 fuselage. It had 2 rows of windows, an upper and a lower. The windows were very large and seemed square. They were white with light, which seemed to be caused by some type of combustion. I asked Captain Childs what he had just seen, and he said he did not know.
Well, that's probably the most accurate assessment you could make.
I don't know.
I have no idea what that was.
Unidentified?
Right.
Flying? I guess it's an object. Nevertheless, I mean, consistent description, which, again, so bizarre. But they got to the ground, they landed, passengers disembarked, they got their luggage, all went home, et cetera, but Project Sign showed up, the Air Force folks, they showed up and they wanted to interview these pilots and see what the H was actually going on. Childs said, yeah, I saw a lighted cockpit, a long boom of its nose, and the center of the object was transparent. Whitties said he didn't see a cockpit or a boom on the nose, and he doesn't think it was transparent. He thinks maybe Childs thought it was transparent because the windows were so large.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, yeah, he can kind of see what he was getting at. But nevertheless, when it shot past, there was no sound. There was no turbulence.
Oh.
It was just an anomaly, essentially.
Well, I guess then, too, if it was a meteor or something, you might actually hear something, I assume.
Right.
Or there would be something else to go off of, so that's weird.
It is. Project Sign immediately eliminated the idea of it being just another aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
They're like,
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, there was nothing else up in the sky right then, so it wasn't an aircraft. Mm-hmm. They eliminated that it was a meteor, which I find interesting.
Okay.
And they obviously, I guess I already said this, but they said it's not even a top secret Navy plane or something else like that might have been down in the Gulf area. They actually said, Project Sign actually said it was an interplanetary vehicle.
What?
An official government document. They came out and said in 1948, this was an interplanetary vehicle.
That actually speaks volumes because at that point in time, if they're going to come out and say that, it means they'd been looking into something like this, came into their own conclusion and said, yeah, this is exactly what that is.
I know, man. Once that declaration was made, the report was immediately declassified and completely destroyed, like incinerated. Like we're going off of almost everyone's word on this because it just does not exist anymore, the official report. So maybe they said too much and they had to destroy it.
Right.
Maybe they were so far off base that they had to destroy it and start again.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, at this point, I was going to say, can I see the report? But I guess we can't.
We can't, apparently. Right. Possibilities, what this might have been. So J. Allen Hynek, our good friend, by the way, go back and listen to that episode if you haven't. It's kind of fun. Gives a little history of who he was and what he did. J. Allen Hynek said, quote, the flaming tail and sudden disappearance were consistent with the brief passage of a meteor. Which, I mean, if you want to think about this rationally, yeah, it probably would be. If you're coming to like a rational explanation.
Yeah.
And, why did they see windows or something like that? I mean, it could have been a glare. It could have been just the way the light played off of the cockpit. It could have been a number of things.
That's what I was going to say. It could be like some trick of the light, if you will.
Yeah. So it seems likely that might be the case. Also, July 24th is during a period of peak meteor activity.
No way.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
The Earth is, at that point, moving through the Aquarid stream, which means there's all sorts of meteors and stuff. In fact, that same night, an amateur observer in Alabama saw 15 meteors on his own in the span of 1 hour.
Jeez. Okay. Well,
So,
but he's an amateur, so
he's an amateur. One of the other ideas that was seriously bandied about was maybe this is a Soviet spy craft.
right.
I mean, you're thinking about this right after World War II, Cold War. Tensions are heightening, and yeah, I mean, maybe they're trying to penetrate our airspace, see how far they can get in, see what they can do without us knowing. So that is a very real possibility as well. The other thing is this happened very close to the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, where we were actually working on rocketry at the time, which was a pretty new technology. And you have all those folks that came over after World War II as part of Operation Paperclip, Werner von Braun and all these other folks that are trying to replicate what they were doing in Europe and building these rockets and so on and so forth. So maybe they're doing something as well. Nevertheless, Zach, I will leave you with this. 20 years later, they both did an interview where, they asked him about, what happened and what do you think it is now? And they both still believe that it was a craft not made of man-made origins. They didn't believe it was a meteor. They didn't believe it was anything else like that. And that was kind of the end of it, except there was this other quote at the very end of the story where Captain Childs said he didn't actually see it shoot into the clouds after it passed by them. It actually vanished instantaneously before their eyes.
Oh, no way.
The reason they didn't say that was because they thought everyone would think they were crazy, and it just made more sense to say that it shot up into the clouds and they never saw it again.
Oh, that is, I get that. It's almost like, did it enter some sort of portal or wormhole or, put on its cloaking device?
Or it just took off at light speed in the same direction and it looked like it vanished.
Dude, that is a spicy little detail there.
Yeah, I know. You're kind of burying the lead there, Mr. Pilot, Mr. Childs.
No kidding.
So, those are the big three in 1948. And, I mean, you kind of know where I came down. Kind of think that the one over Fort Knox was probably a balloon of some sort.
Sure.
The other two, they sound like UFOs or UAPs. It sounds like an orb. It sounds like a drone. It sounds like I don't know what the other one is with, flames shooting out of the back of it, but weird nevertheless. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I would say it sounds like, just based on the evidence, based on the eyewitness accounts, certainly 2 out of the 3 were likely some sort of craft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could see it being, the third one being not terrestrial. The third one, let's just pretend, the hot air balloon, if you will. That could have been terrestrial, right? But it sounds like the first and the third examples that we ran through were definitely something we had never seen before and really can't explain.
Something maneuvering in ways that trained pilots knew just was not possible.
And that's the kicker to me, right? Which is trained observers, trained pilots. They've never seen anything like this before. Yeah. They've been up in the sky, thousands of hours at this point. So, man.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't mention the 2 pilots, Childs and Whitty's. They were both Air Force veterans. They'd both gotten tons of flight hours in overseas as well during the war. And the passenger that saw it, he was an Air Force veteran, so he knew basically what should and should not be in the sky. And it's like you got to take them at their word. They're experts, right?
Indeed.
So at the end of the day, kind of interesting stuff. But like I said at the outset, these hit the national press, and they really ignited the idea that maybe we aren't alone and maybe there's weird stuff up there, and kind of snowballed this whole UFO flying saucer craze that came over the next several decades.
Dang. So these are the originals, right?
These are the ones. These are the ones.
Interesting.
All right, folks. Well, hey, thanks for coming along on that ride with us. And if you weren't aware, I just want to let you know we do have a Patreon, and you can get all of these shows ad-free over there, as well as another show every single week.
That's right, folks. We put out a weekly bonus show called the Wednesday Thursday Show, where we talk about all sorts of weird stuff, fun stuff, and it's available to our patrons. and patrons only. And I will say, for those of you on the fence about signing up, just give it a try. It's
$3.
So $3 a month. Yeah, why not? It seriously helps us with the show. We've got overhead costs. We put a lot of time into it, and it just really means a lot to us.
It does. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. And if you haven't already, please head over and rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local air traffic controller about our podcast, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.